right here I'm just using the corner of the belt, basically turning it like this and using the corner to get rid of some of this material a little bit quicker. So I took this down to my lines and I got this nice and straight and square, and then I ran 120 grit over the top of this, which it looks like I need to do just a little bit more. Still have some big scratches in there, which is no big deal. I'll get that taken care of. But what I want to do now is I want to address this bolster, the front of it, where it's all nice and pretty. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take, if this is the top view right here, the blade, and then we've got the bolster going back like this, I'm going to angle it like this and then just go straight back. So we're going to get rid of this material right here, and I can't decide if I want to leave a little bit of shoulder here at the front and then go back, or just go right into the blade. I'll probably do the shoulder first and then see how that looks, and if I don't like it, I'll just go right into the blade. So the first thing I need to do is make some lines on here. And typically I would probably spray this thing. I just don't know how far back I want the lines to go. I kind of want to go a little bit into the keyhole area, but I'm not sure how that would look. I guess we'll just stop short of there first. So just got to trace my lines around here. And that's going to be pretty close. Yeah, I'm probably going to want to go back a little more than that. But like I said, we'll see here. So I'm trying to get a decent angle so you can see what's going on here. I'm going to slow this belt down a little bit. So I don't want to get too aggressive with this. Just go a little bit at a time and just keep checking. I'm just gonna put a more coarse belt on here. See if we can do better with the heat buildup. kind of see we're getting there. It's definitely not even yet, but we've gotten most of the nasty steel out of there, so it's looking better. And I've gone a little bit past the line here. Kind of needed to get rid of that steel up top, the forge scale. So we'll just go past a little bit on this side and then keep going until we've got a symmetrical bevel there. The bolster is cleaned up and up to 120 grit. So now it's time to put the chamfers or the bevels or whatever you want to call them onto this blade. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use this pencil, the thickness of it, to draw lines basically all the way around it. And man, I can't tell if that's going to be, I think that's too much off of there. I want to keep it a little bit thicker, so I need to find a pencil that's not quite as tall, which I think this one might, yeah, that one will be good. So we'll draw lines with this pencil, and that's what's going to be our bevels. Yeah, that looks better. And I also cut the handle off at 5 inches from the bolster. Okay, so now we have all of our bevel lines. So back over to the grinder to start putting the bevels in. I've got the 36 grit belt back on here. Typically, if I was doing this with just wood, I would just start at 150, but because I'm doing steel with this, I don't want to heat this up too much and risk burning out the epoxy, so we're just going to do it this way. And I'm going to keep more pressure down where the steel is so I don't eat through the wood as fast. And then I'm just keeping track of my lines right up here. And I'm just going to go until I hit those lines and then check the front to make sure we're all straight. Checking the heat and checking often to make sure I'm not going past the line. Looking good. A little bit warm. I gotta let it cool a bit. So here's a little tip for cooling steel without water. You can use air, but you can also take another piece of steel, and this is my 123 block that's actually really cold. And if you just hold it on there, it'll transfer that heat into this colder piece of steel. So it cools a lot quicker. See, we're already back down, so back at it. So for this part, I'm done with the 36. I have a little bit more to go, but this line is going to dead end pretty much right into this transition right here. So I just want to get close and then finish it up with a higher grit. Because if I take this all the way down to that and I go down to this transition and I go to sand with a higher grit, it's going to pull it past that transition, which is something I don't want. So I've just got to do this to the other 3 sides. We'll up the grit, and then that should be pretty close to where we're going to end with these. So here I am on to the 120. I've gotten all my facets put in. So now I just basically need to clean this up just a little bit. Make sure everything's square. And then I'll get on to the hand sanding. I'm going to go up just a little bit higher, run this on a 220 as well, and then I'll get on to hand sanding. Let's help clean it up just a little bit. I also like using the higher grits to just round corners a little bit so they're not uncomfortable. And while I have this 220 grit on, I'm going to smooth out the spine. And then I've also got to take the corners off of the spine as well, but I'll do that with a 400 grit. So I got to clean up inside this choil area. And then chamfer these edges right here so it's more comfortable for the user. And I'm probably going to have to do that with the Dremel, just so I can get up right into this corner here. But for now, I'll get the main parts of this with the grinder. And one more quick thing with before the hand sanding, to do with the 400 grit. Just to get the spine of this knife. And same thing, we want to chamfer these edges a little bit so they're nice and comfortable for the user. And I'm going to say that feels pretty good. Alright, so we're on to everyone's favorite part, and that's hand sanding. I think I'm going to be here for a little while because it's pretty big blade here. But I think the only thing I have to remember to do is, as I'm up here at the bolster, I have to get right up into this corner and press and sand the front part of that bolster, as well as right down there in the corner. And that shouldn't take too much. But what I'll do is I'll get the blade hand sanded, and then I'll flip it around and hand sand the handle and the bolster. And then I'm going to put a resist on the handle material, and then we're going to get it etched. And right now I'm at 220, and I'm using a hard back because I have to clean up this bolster just a little bit that I messed up on the grinding. Which shouldn't be too bad because it wasn't a horrible mess up. But I do have a couple spots where I kind of, I don't know if you can see right here where I kind of dug in a little bit. And that's when I was doing that bolster. But again, nothing major. It shouldn't be too hard to get that stuff out. The other side should be a lot easier because there were fewer mistakes made in the grinding. And we got those lines out up here. Hoping you can see this on the camera. I can never really tell until I edit, so it usually turns out okay. So I'm getting pretty close to done with this. I'm on 600 grit right now, almost done. And I've gotten the front of the bolster, and as soon as I'm done with this last little bit, I have to put my mark on here. And then I'm going to come back and put some tape on it. And then I'm going to hand sand the handle, and hopefully this thing fits inside of my my vise, my handle, my knife maker's vise. Okay, I'm going to be good with that. So it barely fits in my my knife maker's vise. So hopefully it holds in there. But so this is what we've got. I've got some tape on here to protect the finish, and I'm going to use my hard back because of the steel to wood transition. If I use a soft back, it's probably gonna take the wood off before the steel, and then we're gonna have a dip. So I'm gonna go really light on the wood back here and a little more aggressive on the steel, and then kind of work around this transition area, because I definitely don't want to have any weird lumps around that area. So light on the wood, heavy on the steel, and kind of light at that transition too. And I'm just going to keep feeling it to make sure. And I'm starting with the 220. This shouldn't take too long. So I'm going to get all the flats first, and then I'm going to go to the facets. The last thing I'm going to do is a piece of 1200, and I'm just going to go over this with my thumb. It'll clean stuff up really quick. Alright, so there's just a couple more steps before this thing is ready to etch. And the first one is I need to buff it. And then I need to put a resist on the handle so that I don't etch the wood. That's never a good thing. If it was a composite, like a G10 or something, you wouldn't even have to worry about the ferric messing with it, but it'll definitely mess with the wood. Here's where we are at the moment. So we've got this thing, the handle all shaped. We've got the hand sanding done. We're buffed. And I've got a resist, which is just fingernail polish, clear fingernail polish on this wood here. And then up to about here. And then I wrap the backside. So that should be enough to dunk this into the ferric plenty. So it's looking pretty good, and it is time to put it in the etch and see what we're going to get. All right, so for those of you who don't know what my etching process is, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this knife, I'm going to put it in the ferric for about 10-15 minutes. I'll check it in between, and if there's a problem with the etch, like if it's not coming through evenly, then I'll kind of scrub those areas down and then put it back in. But anyway, so after the first etch, what I'll do is I'll pull it out and I'll spray it with Windex, use some 4/0 steel wool to scrub it down, and then I'll buff it. And what the buffing does is it kind of takes away the edges, the harsh edges of the etch, and it kind of gives it a smoother look. Not necessary to do that, but that's just what I do. So let me get my little setup here. And hopefully this thing fits in here. Yep, we're good. So I don't want to go, I think that's a little bit too low. not going to quite fit. There we go. All right, so that's in the ferric. I'm just going to let that hang out for a few minutes and check it. And then if everything's good, we'll just leave it in there for about 15 minutes. Okay, I'm going to check this just to make sure everything's good. And they're looking pretty, everything's looking pretty even on that side. And I think we're good to go. Everything's looking really nice. So we'll just let this hang out for about 15 minutes, come back, and then do all the little doodads in between, and then etch again. Okay, we've been about 15 minutes, and that is looking pretty good. So I'm going to take this out, do the spray with Windex, scrub it with my steel wool, buff it, and then put it back in. And I'll do that probably, I'm going to guess, about 3 more times. And then once that's done, we're going to put it in the coffee etch, and this thing's going to be done. So I'm doing one more step before the coffee. For some reason, I couldn't quite get this to brighten up like I normally do on the buffer. So I'm going to rub it down with a 1500 grit first. And then I'm going to run it under the buffer again, and hopefully that takes care of it. I'm not quite sure. I don't know if it's the size of the knife, and maybe I'm just not hitting all the parts as well as I normally do. I'm not too sure, but for some reason I just can't get that 15 and 20 to brighten up as well as I normally do. Okay, sanded and buffed, and we're good now. I just have to go clean this off with the dish soap and put it in the coffee etch, and it's going to be done. So I'll show you guys one more time after the coffee etch. I just pulled it out of the coffee, and this guy was not wanting to darken up. I must have had something still on the blade that was keeping it from etching, but as you can see, it darkened up pretty nice. I'll try to get some close-up shots of this thing so you can see all the little details. So that is complete, and if you have any questions or comments or suggestions on things that I could do better, don't hesitate to slap them down there in the comments. But anyway, this was a fun build. I'm glad that someone, I can't remember who it was, but somebody recommended it. So maybe you can recommend another build, and we'll go from there for the next video series. Anyway, that's that. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.